Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. Woo!
What's your name?
My name is Drew.
I'm Dean, and welcome to episode 84.
Man, you take a week off and I just lose it all.
You were like cruising, you're like looking around.
And then it just fell
Just
apart.
one word.
Yeah, because I was trying to get back to it and I just missed it by a little bit. Anyway, yeah, we missed a week, so yeah. I was a
sorry
little
about
rusty
that,
there.
guys. I was sick last week, so
Yeah, it's all good.
we are back and hoping to finish up Alien Interview if we can get enough
Yeah.
into it today.
What's the name of this chapter?
The next chapter is called A Lesson in the Future.
Ooh, yeah, this will be spicy.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Let's get
Have you
on
read
this.
it already?
Nope.
Okay, so we're still
I want to
reading
go
it together now.
Yeah, exactly. So we just only had a couple things here to go into. So why don't we start with a message from Chris, who was on, what episode was that?
That was early, I think. It was probably...
Well, we were recording here still. It was the dark side one, the Young and Alan Watts one.
Yeah, so maybe like, I don't know. I would have to look back and find the episode. But yeah, he's on one of our... We'll link it below so you guys can go down and check it
Yeah.
out.
Anyway, he sends us a message. It's a link to, I guess, a conversation that someone posted with ChatGPT. He says, a few cool points made by GPT here. The atoms thing has always made zero sense to me. Such a mind fuck. So let's see what this says. So I don't know what the what this is in conclusion to, but it starts with conclusion.
I think if you click on it, there's like a click-through thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's multiple pages to this.
Okay, let me pop that on screen then. ChatGPT concludes that God exists based on pure logic. Forget what the world says. Can you, according to your intelligence, predict whether God exists or not? Don't consider worldly data. That's an interesting prompt, to not consider worldly data. That's a profound question, and you're asking it in a unique way, not to cite scripture, scientific studies, or philosophy, but to think with raw intelligence. So let me try to answer using logical reasoning, pattern recognition, and internal consistency without being bound by human narratives. 1. The mystery of existence itself. Why does anything exist at all rather than nothing? This question is beyond physics because physics explains how things work, not why there is something instead of nothing. Even if we trace the universe back to the Big Bang or a multiverse or quantum fluctuations, we hit a wall. Why is there a system in the first place that allows fluctuations or laws? Intelligence says the sheer fact that there is existence, order, and logic implies some foundational source. Call it first cause, conscious origin, or God. 2. The laws of nature are too precise. Gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces all have values so finely tuned that even if slightly altered, life couldn't exist. It resembles a programmed system, not random chaos. Intelligence says if you found a perfectly working clock in the middle of a forest, you wouldn't say it appeared from nothing. You'd suspect a designer. The universe is far more complex than a clock. 3. Consciousness is strange. Atoms have no awareness. Neurons are made of atoms. Yet somehow we're conscious. We feel, wonder, love, and suffer. No purely material explanation has solved how subjective experience, qualia, arises. Intelligence says consciousness may not be a byproduct, it might be primary. If consciousness is fundamental, it could be the essence of God, not a side effect of matter. 4. Patterns in nature show intent. A single DNA strand contains more structured information than an encyclopedia. Bees, fractals, Fibonacci patterns, ecosystems, there's a strange harmony. Intelligence says these don't prove God, but they suggest order, intelligence, and underlying intent. Maybe not an old man in the sky, but something that gives rise to order from within chaos. Conclusion. From pure logic, not belief. The probability that all existence, order, and consciousness came from absolute nothingness without intent is extremely low. It's more consistent with logic to believe that there is some form of ultimate intelligent source or consciousness behind all things, whether that is traditional God or something entirely beyond our comprehension. Intelligence leans towards yes, something greater exists.
Yeah. Ooh, that is a good point.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, these were good points. The mystery of existence is a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there something instead of nothing? Like that.
Yeah, that'll keep philosophers awake for a long time.
Well, right. But the point being made here is it's a question outside of physics because physics can't answer it. It can only answer
operate within
how do things work once they're here, but it can't say why is there something rather than nothing.
What's the function of it being here in the first place?
Right. Well, why would there be any reason for something to come out of nothing or for something to come into being?
There's got to be some other
exist?
force or some other that's causing cause and reaction, right?
The clockwork sort of argument I can give or take. I've seen enough like arguments to the counter of this that you're basically, it's like the anthropic principle. It's the idea that of course, if there are fine-tuned things needed in order for life to exist, you are life, so therefore you are on one of those things. So for all you know, there's a million trillion other universes out there that tried and failed to start, and of course you're in the one that has the rules that work.
Yeah, I mean, to have that thought in the first place, it has to be that case.
Right. So, well, what they're arguing is that even if it is highly refined, it doesn't necessarily argue for someone doing the refining per se. And per se, that's true, but it's also not arguing against God either. It's just saying that it could go either way. And I think they're right. Consciousness, this is a good argument.
The atoms having no awareness,
how do
neurons
how do you
no
build awareness and conscious experience out of puzzle pieces that are not aware?
Unless, panpsychism is true.
Well, in that case, everything is aware, right?
Yeah.
So how do you build awareness where nothing is aware, though? Like, you can't take a bunch of building blocks and smash them together and all of a sudden awareness where there was none before.
But both points, whether panpsychism or, the idea of there being some prime mover or whatever, it's the same idea of there being some kind of consciousness bridge between all living things. It's all like the source that's being split in two pieces.
Well, it's the argument that, consciousness is either a separate domain, which forces you into a weird duality, or that consciousness is primary. If you want to have a Unitarian view that one theory can sort of contain everything, that you don't need two different sets of laws. then it makes more sense for the consciousness to be underneath. Although it has been pointed out, and it's valid, that just as unlikely as it is to take unconscious dumb materials and put them together and create consciousness, it's equally unlikely to take a bunch of conscious stuff and create dumb stuff out of it. Like there is no evidence either way showing that dumb stuff can make consciousness, and there's no evidence showing that consciousness can make the dumb stuff out of nothing either.
Yeah, it's almost
Neither
like
has
a
been
symbiotic
shown
relationship.
Right.
Some sort of, like, that might be the only type of it. Like, if you're not attached to another physical being, then you're immaterial, and your consciousness is just floating out there like these as isbies.
Right. And so if you're
Until
some
you actually,
disincarnated being, what are the rules of interacting with the material world? No one knows.
Right.
No one knows how embodiment works, or how, if there is consciousness is primary, how does the conscious tie itself to the matter, right?
Yeah. That's the great bridge between knowing patterns in nature. Yeah.
Patterns showing intent. I don't know. I mean, that's definitely, it's like an argument from aesthetics that like everything is like beautiful and structured and therefore there's a designer, and I could take or leave that argument.
Yeah. I mean, I think nature,
I find it compelling, but I don't think it has a lot of argumentative power. It's not going to convert someone who thinks it's not a good argument.
That's a good point. And that was the conclusion there.
Yeah, and then the conclusion.
Yeah, it's very interesting. If this was from GPT, like, they did a pretty good job too of following the prompt.
Yeah, it's an interesting prompt.
And not bringing in too much.
Don't consider worldly data.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to say. All right, cool.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for sending that to us. That was good food for thought.
We'll link that for everybody too below if you guys want to go check it out yourselves.
All right, so what do we got here?
Yeah, this is Pete Holmes. I don't know if you've ever seen this guy. He's a comedian, and he's also kind of like a stoic, like a kind of becoming more famous, like a stoic online.
Yeah, he doesn't ring a bell.
But he's also like Christian, and like, you'd have to. I'm sure you've probably seen him before. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe you will now. But
yeah, maybe this will be my first exposure. Let's check out what he's got to say here.
Yeah,
the so big they can only be told with lies. That's a cute way of saying metaphor is the only language we have to speak of God. Metaphor means always true, sometimes really happened. Because what's interesting about the Bible, one of the weird things about that text is that it's metaphor overlain with history. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like metaphorized history, and we don't know where the line is. Opinions vary. But when you're trying to talk about the ineffable, metaphor isn't just as close as you can get. It's the only way to do it. It stirs you and moves you in a way that it's, the truth of it is it's true in the way that energy moves in the world. It's true in the way the patterns of the universe are reflected in the story. Because you can tell a story and it's bullshit, like, but the metaphors and the myths that stick with us, they'll rock you.
And it's not about solving the mystery. No! It's about appreciating the fact that it is a mystery.
And we want to talk about it. And more than that, we want to commune with it. And to know that, we have to give it some sort of symbol. Carl Jung says we're not transformed by ideas. We're transformed by symbols. This is why the crucified Christ is still a hot thing.
Stories.
Yes. There are some truths so...
That's a really cool point. I like that a lot. Yeah. You can't just break everything down into structured, reasoned, descriptive language because we don't have words for everything. And some concepts, you would spend so much time trying to spell out a direct treatment of it that you could save immense time and precision by just using a metaphor.
Yeah. And you can get the same feeling for it.
Yeah. Well, and also that essentially opens up all of storytelling, because any storytelling like that's fiction or whatever, just because it's fiction, you another way to word that is you could say it's a lie.
Right.
Right? Like it is the telling of things that are not true, that have not happened as though they did or something, right? And so in one way it's a lie, but in another way people get so enamored by storytelling, by movies, by video games, by books, because it's not about whether this character existed or that fictional world existed or dragons or whatever.
Of their life and their experience are the symbols of which those characters on the page or on the screen,
right? That
representing,
right? That character coming up against that hurdle, that challenge, and overcoming it is true. And how they do it, right? Like if it's a good story, then those elements within the story are true, and they teach you something, and they are applicable to the real world in ways that you probably couldn't necessarily just tell someone. There's a way of like stories and metaphors to engage your mind in a imaginative process that allows your mind to chew on an issue and learn something real, even though the whole premise or the whole fact of the matter is a lie, a fiction.
Yeah. What do you think about all of life being that metaphor for whatever's beyond it?
Yeah, I mean, it takes me back to my DMT experience where, you see how temporary, but how conscious and planned and wanted this experience of the lie of a human life.
The playful nature of it.
Right? Like the lie of our mortality and all that we get engrossed in, the lie of being our body. That's all, a way to force you into a metaphor to like learn things that might be hard to learn otherwise as a immortal spiritual being that is always been around.
Not necessarily have those experiences,
right?
To
so
challenge your character in a way,
right? So you create a world, a metaphor, a lie that you can immerse yourself into in order to experience fear and danger,
ultimately knowing that there is no consequence but learning,
right?
Because you know that you are the disembodied spirit,
or learning, or just experience in itself, raw experience. Yeah, which is a form of learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I say life experience is where you're going to learn the most in life, like,
right,
no matter what the case is. I mean, you could read books all day, but once you get to a job or do something new, that's the only time you really know what it is that you were reading about or learning about. Right?
Reading about doing something and doing it are not the same thing.
Yeah.
And you can read a lot about something in detail, paying attention, and learn about it and be better off trying to do that thing, but it's not the same as doing that thing.
Yeah.
There's certain things you just can't learn by reading.
Yep.
But interesting.
I think you'd like this guy if you checked him out some more. Pete Holmes.
Okay, Pete Holmes.
Yeah. There's a lot. He does a lot of podcasts, and you see a lot of his. I see a lot of his clips.
I like
on
the
our
way
Instagram.
He's talking here, his language and stuff. So, thanks for sharing that.
He's a comedian too, so he's got a whole lineup where he talks about the similar stuff, but in a funny way.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, shall we get started?
Let's go
on the book.
Yeah.
Okay. This might be the last normal chapter. I'm not sure. Chapter 13, A Lesson in the Future. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy personal note. I think this transcript speaks for itself also. I relayed Errol's exact communication as faithfully as possible. My superior officers became very alarmed about the possible military implications of what Errol said in this interview. All right. Official transcript of interview. Top secret. Official transcript of the U.S. Army Air Force, Roswell Army Airfield, 509th Bomb Group. Subject, alien interview, 31st of July, 1947. First session. It is my personal belief that the truth should not be sacrificed on the altar of political, religious, or economic efficiency or expediency. As an officer, pilot, or engineer of the domain, it is my duty to protect the greater good of the domain and its possessions. However, we cannot defend ourselves against forces of which we are not aware. The isolation of Earth from the rest of civilization prevents me from discussing many subjects with you at this time. Security and protocol prevent me from revealing any but the broadest general statements about the plans and activities of the domain. However, I can give you some information that you may find useful. I must return to my assigned duties on the space station now. I have provided as much help as I feel ethically able to offer, given the requirements and constraints of my duties as an officer, pilot, and engineer of the domain forces. Therefore, I will depart as an ISB from Earth within the next 24 hours. Editor's note. The following several paragraphs appear to be personal comments made by Matilda, the stenographer, or to the stenographer regarding her interview with Errol. What this means is that Errol will leave her doll with us as her craft is damaged beyond repair. We can examine, dissect, and study the body at our leisure. She does not have any further use for it, nor does she have any personal feelings or attachments to it, as others are readily available for her use. Errol does not recommend that there is any technology in the body that Earth scientists will find useful. However, the technology of the body is simple, yet vastly beyond the reckoning of our current ability to analyze or reverse engineer any facet of it. The body is neither biological or mechanical, but a unique fabrication of materials and ancient technologies not found on any Earth-type planet. As Errol mentioned previously, a very rigid and distinctive hierarchy of social, economic, and cultural classes exists throughout the domain, which has remained unvaried and inviolate for many millennia. The body type and function assigned to an ISB officer vary specifically according to the rank, class, longevity, training level, command level, service record, and meritorious citations earned by each individual ISB, as with any other military insignia. So the bodies are basically, you can take them or leave them. She's going to leave it with us. We're not going to learn anything from it, even though it does represent advanced tech. And
yeah, but it's like
for her, it doesn't matter anyway, because she'll get a body based on her rank no matter what. And she already has multiple others.
Yeah. So there's no worry.
So she's just going to abandon it.
Yeah.
The body used by Errol is specifically designed for an officer, pilot, and engineer of her rank and class. The bodies of her companions, which were destroyed in the crash, were not the same rank or class, but of a junior rank. Therefore, the appearance, features, composition, and functionality of those bodies were specialized and limited to the requirements of their duties. So maybe this is where like the small grays and the tall grays come from.
Well, even like the tall whites and like like any different race in a sense, really.
Right.
Like if there's some sort of like, yeah, if they just have everybody based on what, like you need some big strong dude that's going to be your security guard, like maybe the humans are your best choice, right? Or,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
unless you
Yeah.
got something bigger that's stronger or whatever. Like you get like a tall white dude with, big bust muscles or something.
Well, yeah, you would probably want something non-human so that it's not. You would want a doll body still, so it's not like prone to.
Yeah, but looks like.
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
if they
yeah.
can manufacture that, they can manufacture anything, you know?
Right. Because the whole problem with the human bodies is they're so fragile, right? Like,
Yeah.
we die so many different ways.
Right.
We need perfect atmosphere and pressure and temperature
Yeah.
and chemical environment in order
Reminds
to
me of-
even live at all.
It reminds me of the X-Files episodes where there's that alien hybrid guy that when they stab him, there's like a weird pus that comes out and it like burns everybody with like radiation. Do you remember that guy?
No.
It's like one of the villains, like one of the doll bodies that the aliens in the show used, or it was like a hybrid, like governmental alien hybrid, and it would go around attacking people in the show. And they would like, anytime anybody stabbed it, it would like, the blood would be like boil out and like cause like burns on them and stuff.
That sounds like Alien too.
Yeah, it was like an alien human hybrid, like part of their like cloning operation.
Yeah. No, I mean like the movie Alien. Those creatures always had acid blood.
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar to that. It's like maybe they're just some sort of like chemical makeup, but they look like humans. Like it looked like a normal human person, but
Right.
they're like android-like, and they just had one mission they were on. But yeah, it's interesting just to think about their ability to make different bodies,
Yeah.
what they could look like.
Right. All right, let's finish out this section. The junior officers whose bodies were damaged in the crash have left their bodies and returned to their duties on the space station. The damage suffered by their bodies was due primarily to the fact that they were officers of lower rank. They used bodies which were partially biological and therefore far less durable and resilient than hers, which is why she survived and they didn't.
Yeah.
Now, this is back to editor's note. At this point, the transcript appears to resume with the statements made by Errol. Although the domain will not hesitate to destroy any active vestiges, you know what? Let's, I think we're at a good stopping point here.
Okay. Yeah, let's take a quick break
Before
then.
we get into Errol's voice.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute. We'll continue on with Errol here.
Yeah. See you guys in a bit.
Feel better when I tell you forever. Make you feel better when I tell you forever. Make you feel better when I tell you forever, ever, ever, ever. Make you feel better when I tell you forever, ever, 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 ever. She faded, I'm faded too. Faded, I'm faded too. She faded, I'm faded too. Faded, I'm faded. I woke up before the sun. Really ain't one for sleeping by the woman of my dreams. And I ain't much of a dreamer. Ciroc and Pellegrino on rocks. We out in Reno and walk out the casino. Hit slots for a few Cinos. She faded, I'm faded too. Grabbing me out in public, telling me that she loves it. We taking it to the room, and maybe I'm taking shrooms. I'm probably taking shrooms. It's one up with the Princess Peaches. I'm eating brunch like it's noon. Hey, baby, we can do it. Take your time, take your time. I'ma give you this here best shit of your life, of your life. Just some wine, sip some wine. We gon' bear for a while. I know a couple ways to make you smile, make you mine. Alright, 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 let's go. 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 Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Make you feel better when I tell you forever, ever, ever, ever. Make you feel better when I tell you forever, ever, 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 ever. Feel like I'm tripping off of something I can't feel. Hallucinations. Losing patience, the pace is racing. What's real now? I'm just trying to swerve to these blurred lines. These turbines ain't fast enough. Either that or I'm faded, faced it, base waist to the fattest. This mind state that I'm standing in ain't right, cause I've been staring back into this mirror, telling my fist not to take flight. What I really need is my painkiller, my space filler, my love. My beta station gon' stay trill, calling my date quiller, my drug. I need that. It feel better when we lay back and go slow. It may take forever, but it makes it better when we both know we both grow. So I'll take this shot of this Bronco while you babysit on that glass. I'll lay back on this cruise control until we hit the flow with that gas. It's alright. Make you feel better when I tell you forever. Let's go. Let's go. Make you feel better when I tell you forever, ever, ever, ever. Let's go. Make you feel better when I tell you forever. Let's go. Let's go. Make you feel better when I tell you forever, ever, 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 ever. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. That was good timing. Welcome back, y'all, for segment number 2, episode 84. I don't know if we said it in the beginning because we messed up so bad. Episode 84.
We did.
Okay. All right, let's jump back into it.
All right, so
this
now
is from
we're
Errol, right?
Yeah, this is where the editor believes that it goes back to statements by Errol rather than Matilda.
All right.
Although the domain will not hesitate to destroy any active vestiges of the old Empire operations wherever they are discovered, this is not our primary mission in this galaxy. I am sure that the old Empire mind control mechanism can be deactivated and destroyed eventually. However, it is not possible to estimate how long this might take, as we do not understand the extent of this operation at this time. We do know that the old Empire Force screen is vast enough to cover this end of the galaxy, at least. We also know from experience that each force generator and trapping device is very difficult to detect, locate, and destroy. Also, it is not the current mission of the Domain Expeditionary Force to commit resources to this endeavor. The eventual destruction of these devices may make it possible for your memory to be restored simply by virtue of not having it erased after each lifetime. Fortunately, the memory of an ISB cannot be permanently erased.
So does that mean no matter how long we've had our memories erased,
That
we'll
eventually
always
we can
be able to
reclaim
remember it?
At some point, we'll
right?
be able to.
Like it's never permanently erased.
Right. That's
So that means
kind of what
we
she's
can.
saying.
Yeah. Okay. It's cool.
There are many other active space civilizations who maintain various nefarious operations in this area, not the least of which is dumping unwanted ISBs on Earth. None of these craft are hostile or in violent opposition to the domain forces. They know better than to challenge us. For the most part, the domain ignores Earth and its inhabitants, except to ensure that the resources of the planet itself are not permanently spoiled. This sector of the galaxy was annexed by the domain and is the possession of the domain to do with or dispose of as it deems best. The moon of Earth and the asteroid belt have become a permanent base of operations for the domain forces. Needless to say, any attempt by humans or others to interfere in the activities of the domain in this solar system, even if it were possible, which it definitely is not, will be terminated swiftly. This is not a serious concern, as I mentioned earlier, since Homo sapiens cannot operate in open space. So she's saying, as long as you guys don't mess with our bases on the moon and the asteroid belt,
Right.
you don't have to worry about us. But you can't mess with us anyway because we're so great and you guys are squishy humans who die in space.
Yeah, except for when we shot you down, huh, Errol? Huh, Errol?
Yeah, but that's not
Just
being a
kidding.
threat to their permanent bases of
course not.
operations, right?
Still.
What I don't understand is the nature of the jail, the prison planet, in such a
And
way
why it
that
would
they
have
say
to
that the
continue.
force field goes throughout a whole sector of the galaxy, but like it's safe for them to have bases on the moon and the asteroid belt. Because they did talk about previous expeditionary forces that got lost here and trapped as humans, right? So there has to be some sort of range of danger for them to be within the confines of the prison planet.
Well, and also maybe they have, because we've heard from other, like the interview with the reptilian, the one we did.
Yeah.
They talked about how like easily susceptible our ISB minds. They didn't say ISBs, but our minds are to being mind controlled.
Right.
That there might be something to that, where because we're in these bodies, we are susceptible to mind control. And if you're in a different body with different chemistry or no chemistry, then you're not susceptible to the dangers of the
same
trap.
sort of like psionic attacks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but she already said they lost a bunch of people here, right? So
And those could be deaths where they were able to, like, if they killed the body, there might be some sort of, I guess, yeah. I mean, that's
Right,
a good
so
point,
that's what I'm
because the
saying.
ISBs themselves are the ones being trapped, not the bodies.
If
I
one of their
guess.
doll bodies were to die on the
Yeah,
moon,
no, that's a good point. Yeah.
would they get trapped up in the prison planet of Earth and sucked down to be a human?
I guess that's probably maybe what she's talking about then. Like, if they have bases on the moon, they're risking that. And if you're risking that, either you're not losing enough because of your defenses that to make it a real big problem for you in the long run, or you didn't see it coming and like it's kind of like a
Right, but at this
Like a
point,
late
they know
reaction.
about it. Yeah,
yeah, it's more like their timescales are just not the same as ours. Like
Right,
they're
right. willing
willing to lose a certain amount because they know a trillion years from now everybody's going to be back and it's going to be like nothing happened.
right.
You know, like that could be the other thing is like they're just operating on such a timescale that it seems like they don't care, right?
Totally.
But
All right, let's keep going. Of course, we will continue with the next steps, the domain expansion plan, which has remained on the schedule for billions of years. Over the next 5,000 years, there will be increasing traffic and activity of the domain forces as we progress towards the center of this galaxy and beyond to spread our civilization throughout the universe. If humanity is to survive, it must cooperate to find effective solutions to the difficult conditions of your existence on Earth. Humanity must rise above its human form and discover where they are and that they are ISBs and who they really are as ISBs in order to transcend the notion that they are merely biological bodies. Once these realizations have been made, it may be possible to escape your current imprisonment. Otherwise, there will be no future for the ISBs on Earth.
it'll just be more of the same, or
Yeah. I mean, at least in the short term anyway, like on trillions of years time scales, I'm sure something will change, but
I wonder if because of the trap of our ISB selves, if during like a time when there's nothing to incarnate into, like during like calamities where like everything's just gone.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like if there was something to happen, would our Isby souls still be trapped and just have no body to go back into?
Yeah, I think it would be like a time of ghosts or whatever, right?
You're just haunted by your previous lives and there's no actual physical world anymore.
Just like wander the world aimlessly, stuck here, unable to incarnate, without memories of your Isbiness.
Jeez. All right, well, that's not a great thought. All right, continue.
Although there are no active battles or war being waged between the domain and the Old Empire, there still exists the covert actions of the Old Empire taken against Earth through their thought control operation. When no one knows that these activities exist, the effects can be observed clearly. The most obvious examples can be observed of these actions against the human race can be seen as incidents of sudden, inexplicable behavior. A very recent instance of this occurred in the United States military just before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Just 3 days before the attack, someone in authority ordered all the ships in Pearl Harbor to go into port and secure for inspections. The ships were ordered to take all the ammunition out of their magazines and store it below. On the afternoon before attack, all of the admirals and generals were attending parties, even though 2 Japanese aircraft carriers were discovered standing right off Pearl Harbor. The obvious action to take would have been to contact Pearl Harbor by telephone to warn them of the danger of a fight starting and to put the ammunition back and order the ships to get out of port into open sea.
Yeah.
About 6 hours before the Japanese attack began, a U.S. Navy ship sank a small Japanese submarine right outside the harbor. Instead of contacting Pearl Harbor by telephone to report the incident, a warning message was put into top secret code, which took about 2 hours to encode, and then it took another 2 hours to decode. The word of warning to Pearl Harbor did not arrive until 10 a.m. Pearl Harbor time, Sunday, 2 hours after the Japanese attack destroyed the U.S. fleet. How do things like this happen? If the men who were responsible for these obviously disastrous errors were stood up and asked bluntly to justify their actions and intentions, you would find out that they were quite sincere in their jobs. Ordinarily, they do the very best they can the very best they can do for people and for nations. However, all of a sudden, from some completely unknown, undetectable source, enters these wild, unexplainable situations that just can't exist. The Old Empire thought control operation is run by a small group of old baboons with very small minds. They are playing insidious games with no purpose and no goal other than to control and destroy Isbys who could otherwise manage themselves perfectly well if left alone. These types of artificially created incidents are being forced upon the human race by the operators of the mind-controlled prison system. The prison guards will always promote and support oppressive or totalitarian activities of Isbys on Earth. Why not keep the inmates fighting between themselves? Why not empower madmen to run the governments of Earth? The men who run the criminal governments of Earth mirror the commands given them by covert thought controllers of the Old Empire. So basically, we're run by the Illuminati, and their job is to keep chaos in the world.
Yeah, I mean that's another scary thought. Like you think about like the potential for that in like our daily lives.
Dude, it makes some sense out of all the weird conspiracies throughout history, though.
Yeah. Well, and you gotta think where we're at now, right? Like what's going on now in the world.
Yeah, well, because
and
one of the
what's
weirdest
causing all
hard
these,
things
like
to-
there's so much logical nonsense going on right now.
right.
Like if you were to think about all these situations going on in the world and logically, you just are dumbfounded by how many things have been overlooked and how many things are just being completely ignored.
Well, and for short-sighted reasons too, right? Like
Yeah.
when you have a deep understanding, and not saying I do, but like when you have a deep enough understanding of like economics and how the world works and business and whatnot, like you can understand that this like selfish zero-sum game attitude of exploiting everyone to your own benefit ultimately even makes you poorer off than you could be otherwise in a world where everyone is thriving.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
It makes no sense.
unless you're that psychotic that you're willing to thrive at a lower standard because that standard is
It's still
is-
miles above the rest.
right, is a percentage wise higher than it
Yeah.
would be above the rest that in a
different
other
situation.
scenario.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you take a different situation where the people who are making these decisions and creating the chaos in the world didn't have the power that they have or didn't have the backing that they have in the world, we would be having a totally different conversation if the majority were actually ruling.
Right, right. Or if rulership was really decentralized, like
Yeah.
like if we had the power with our election abilities to actually put people in power who are not connected to the machine and refuse to interface with it, you know?
Mm-hmm. And just ignore it as if it's not there.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Ron Pauls and
Yep.
characters such as that.
Yep. People
we
who would
could
just
do, but
deny
it just we don't. Like it takes a certain level
because
of like,
like there's some sort of thing where they've got the mass media, the majority of like what we intake on a daily basis, like the majority of humans is biased. Like people
Yeah.
don't want to see it, but it's biased.
Well,
and
it's
it creates
manipulative.
these it creates these manipulative little bubbles that puts people in against each other.
yeah. So I think basic like a rough sketch of how the world works is that essentially, in order to yield great power, you need to control people in positions of power. And so what you do is you look at what the populace is riled up about right now. Like what do they care about right now? And then you divide your ruling lines along the lines of what the people care about. And you set up a false dichotomy. And so that people who disagree about this and that,
Agree
like,
about
you
all
have,
the middle
you
stuff.
have leaders all across
Yeah.
that spectrum to represent you, and so you're either going to pick someone from here or here or here, but whoever it is, they're still playing that same game.
Well, yeah, because the majority of people, like that's the what you're painting there for me is like a big arc of people's cares, and you see like they disagree about the stuff here, but they agree about all of this stuff in the middle,
And so,
and then they disagree again about the more extreme stuff on this side.
Mhm.
So you're taking the extremes of both of their views and you're making them fight about it when you just ignoring all of the 90% of things that they do agree on
yeah.
and could get behind together and make a big change.
Well, you set up an Overton window through like media manipulation, right? And you set up a debate between intellectuals who debate either side of a topic, but they're debating the artificially controlled side A
extremes.
and side B.
Yeah.
They're artificially controlled. Like there are other options other than side A and side B. There's a million other options.
Yeah.
But because they can frame the conversation as it's this or that, people are going to be steered towards agreeing more with this or more with that. Some people will object to to joining that dichotomy, but then they slice it up so many times on so many different topics
Yep.
that you're likely to fall into
Some of their
one
boxes.
of those camps
Yeah.
in some of the topics,
Yep.
which then makes you play into their political game
Yeah.
and
It's-
therefore fall for choosing the candidates that they prepare.
Yep. Yeah. It's all so crazy to think about as you get older.
Or that are controlled by moneyed interests or party politics or whatever. That's not a ground up initiative. It's people being
It's not a true
professional
ground up initiative.
politicians to be professional politicians. And of course, those people are easily manipulable by money.
Yeah. Or just
And
success and
influence.
power.
Right.
And influence. Exactly. Yeah. I didn't expect us to divulge into this, but yeah. It's
Down
a-
the conspiracy
it's
rabbit
just,
hole.
hey.
We haven't done enough of it yet.
No, I think I
gotta
think
go
we're
super
tipping our
conspiratorial
hat a
at some
bit
point.
into it, but yeah, we'll go a little bit deeper into the governmental conspiracy stuff. I think.
I may have been muted for a whole bunch of this. So if
No way.
that's the
You
case-
only you?
yeah, just me.
No way.
I just found my thing muted and I unmuted it. So
Oh well, hopefully not.
hopefully I don't have to cut out a whole bunch of this chunk that we just went through. But let's keep going here.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Let me try and find where I was here. The human race will continue to shadow box with this for a long time, as long as it remains the human race. Until then, the Isbys on Earth will continue to live a series of consecutive lives over and over and over. The same Isbys who lived during the rise and fall of civilization in India, China, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome are inhabiting bodies in the present time in America, France, Russia, Africa, and around the world. In between each lifetime, an Isby is sent back again to begin all over, as though the new life was the only life they had ever lived. They begin anew in pain, in misery, in mystery. Some Isbys have been transferred to Earth more recently than others. Some Isbys have been on Earth only a few hundred years, so they have no personal experience with the earlier civilizations of Earth. They have no experiences of having lived on Earth, and so could not remember the previous existence here. Even if their memory was restored, they might, however, remember lives they lived elsewhere on other planets and in other times. Others have been here since the first days of Lemuria. In any case, the Isbys of Earth are here forever until they can break the amnesia cycle, conquer the electronic traps set up by their captors, and free themselves. Because the domain has 3,000 of their own Isbys in captivity on Earth also, they have no interest in solving this problem. This problem has never been encountered or effectively solved before in the universe, as far as they know. They will continue their efforts to free those Isbys from Earth, where and when it is possible, but it will require time to develop an unprecedented technology and the diligence to do so.
Oh shit.
And then we go back to an editor's note saying that the following is a statement by Matilda, which we'll read now because then the chapter ends.
All right.
I think it is Errol's sincere desire, as one Isby to another, that the rest of our eternity will be as pleasant as possible. And that's the end of chapter 13.
So they're trying to say like it's going to be as pleasant as it's ever been for Isbys on Earth, potentially because of the downfall of the empire.
Right.
So like there's not as much like
basically with-
direct input from the old empire that was put into place, but that so we might see some sort of like glimmers of hope that we may be at a time we're at the point now where we have the potential to break it because we're not being as actively oppressed.
Right.
Right. Okay. But that doesn't necessarily because they haven't figured out the problem of breaking these types of traps ever before, that there is little hope that they're just going to like do it real quick.
Right. So, and because of that, and because it's unprecedented, it's not a priority. And they think,
and because there's only 3,000 lives as opposed to like millions of lives of their own here, like 3,000 might be just
not enough for them to care about.
Yeah, it's just not enough for them to like put all their resources towards it.
I mean, how much would we direct world resources over 3,000 lives? And we only have, 7 billion people on the planet, right?
True. Yeah, it's sad reality, but it's just reality. Yeah. If you have limited resources or time or like,
Well, they have basically unlimited time.
Basically unlimited, but
and their populations have to be in the trillions.
So
3,000
is just too low of a percentage for them.
Especially with taking into account in
all of
eternal time scales, they'll eventually get to it.
Yeah, of course, and they're going to act as if, we were planning on coming all along, like we're the saviors. Like,
well, we were never not planning. We were just never a priority until recently.
We were going to do that on Tuesday. Tuesday was 3 trillion years from now.
It's Taco Tuesday. I had to go to my favorite restaurant, man. Chill.
I'm coming. Like, right?
All right.
No,
that's a good stopping point. So there's not much left after this. There's next chapter is Errol reviews the interview transcripts.
Okay, cool. I'm probably going to finish off. We could probably go into some more clips then that we prepared.
And then there's also a chapter about Matilda's interrogation.
Oh, afterwards she had her own interrogation from the people.
And then there's a last chapter with Errol departing.
Okay, cool.
And that ends. And a postscript.
We
got a little bit still.
Okay, cool. All right, let's take a little break. We'll be back soon. All right, enjoy.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Born Experience. You now tune into the one and only and Born. And since I've been gone for a minute, I want to take my time, 'cause tonight it's just you and I. Another sleepless night, another day goes by. Another baby dies, another angel cries. Another love lost, another living to die. I'm not trying to make a love song, I'm trying to make it right. I'm trying to save a life from a lie that we chase every night with our eyes wide open. Tell me why we have to let the love die. Tell me one time, do we really have to let go and say goodbye? In the eyes I reflected on my past, looking back like a photograph snapped in a flash. I relapsed and I realized you and I were the same. And in her smile I can be me again. And since nothing's changed but the seasons, in search of the reasons for this pain that I'm feeling, 'cause we were meant to be free. Then we stopped and threw the key into the bottom of the sea. She was looking for a lover and I'm honored to be. And I would never leave, I got a promise to keep. I leave it all out on my blood on the beat, till it drips from my eyes and it falls to her cheek. Feel me out, hear me now, hear me breathe. You don't have to agree, but you gotta believe. There's more to life than meets the eye. There's still love between you and I. And since I left and nothing changed much, it's still the same love, you're still my little angel. So fly with me, we can take the skies, you and I. Yeah, and since you left and nothing changed much, it's still the same love, you're still my little angel. So fly with me, we can take the skies, you and I. We were meant to be free. And I hope you get this message from me, 'cause misery loves company and I don't wanna proceed. Foresee the future in her eyes every time that we meet. And I need you in my life, she's a sigh of relief. Wait a sec, take a breath, make it deep. My mama always said better follow your dreams, so I dropped out instead, starting writing 16s, hoping that my little brother doesn't follow my lead and earn a college degree. Be a man that I never could be. Learn from me 'cause the lessons are free. See, I made my mistakes so you don't have to repeat. Where I failed many ways, where you gotta succeed. Rest in peace to my brother Big Don. Your memory lives strong through the song. I carry on, it's been a long while since you and I last talked. Still haven't played much ball at all where you left off, but I picked it up back now. I'll never back down since you fell on that floor. Still haven't sat down and really thought about it, 'cause it's hard to reimagine your closest friend collapsing in a second of a fraction. You were gone. front of my eyes. In the middle of the court, you died without a sign. If I don't live my life to the fullest for you and I, everything else would be a lie. And since you left, for nothing changed much. Still the same love, I miss you every day, bruh. So wait for me till we reunite. I'ma make sure to live my life for you and I. Since you left, for nothing changed much. Still the same love, I miss you every day. Yeah, wait for me till we reunite. I'ma make sure to live my life for you and I. You know what you got before it's too late to know what you've lost and it's gone. Cause it's everything that we need. Anything in between is obsolete. I moved on and never looked back, but memories of the past I reminisce over you, my God. Making sure your legacy never dies is my job. And forever ain't long, cause every day I'm born. For every page is torn, another day has gone by, and another page dries in this book called You and I. Since you left, for nothing changed much. Still the same love, I miss you every day. So wait for me until we reunite. I'ma make sure to live my life for you and I. For you and I. For you and I. I'ma make sure to live my life for you and I. Since you left, for nothing changed much. Still the same love, I miss you every day. Yeah, wait for me till we reunite. I'ma make sure to live my life for you and I. Yeah, for you and I. I'ma make sure to live my life for you and I.
Welcome back. Dude, that song is so sick. I love the way he uses the samples in the songs, and then we'll like at one point he says the sample says, "And I hope," and then he raps off of that lyrically, makes that a part of the lyric.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I love when people do stuff like that. Very cool.
I agree.
They Slum Village with Jay Dilla, they used to do some stuff like that, which was really cool. There was a really good song they had.
It makes sense to do, yeah. If you're using a very pronounced, like, you know, something that, where they're speaking at all in the sample, like, play off it a bit.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense. I like it.
All right.
Real quick, we're drinking the Symphonic Surge from New Glory Craft Brewery.
It's Rhythmic Surge.
What did I say?
Symphonic.
Oh, rhythmic.
I don't know where you
symphonic.
got that.
I saw
both
the mix.
music terms.
I don't know where I got that. The Rhythmic Surge.
They're one point.
The hazy IPA hits with a vibrant wave of tropical flavors, powered by Sabro. What is that? Brew One, and Amarillo hops, coconut, juicy pineapple, and stone fruit notes come straight from the hops themselves, delivering a bold, refreshing punch. It's a sensory experience, smooth, full of life, and impossible to ignore. Stone cold and drink fresh. 7.2%.
Yeah. What the heck is stone fruit?
Don't know.
I've never heard of such. But cheers.
Cheers, bud. Cheers, brother.
I didn't wait for the cheers.
All good. I didn't either. This is almost empty.
All right. Chapter 14. Errol reviews the interview transcripts. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy personal note. Shortly after I finished recounting the previous interview to Errol, to the stenographer, I was summoned urgently to the office of the commanding officer of the base. I was escorted by 4 heavily armed military policemen. When I arrived, I was asked to be seated in a very large makeshift office that had been arranged with a conference table and chairs. In the office were several dignitaries I had seen at various times in the gallery. I recognized a few of them because they were famous men. I was introduced to these men, which included Army Air Force Secretary Symington, General Nathan Twining, General Jimmy Doolittle, General Vandenberg, and General Norstedt. Much to my surprise, Charles Lindbergh was also in the office. Secretary Symington explained to me that Mr. Lindbergh was there as a consultant to the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force. There were several other men present at the room which were not introduced. I assumed that these men were personal aides to the officers or agents of some intelligence service. All of this sudden attention, not only from the secretary and generals, but from world famous people. Sorry, I was just making sure I was recording.
Make sure you're not muted again. Yeah.
But from such world famous people as Mr. Lindbergh and General Doolittle made me realize how critically important my role as an interpreter for Errol was, as seen through the eyes of others. Until this time, I was not really aware of this except in a peripheral sense. I suppose this was because I was so absorbed in the details of the extraordinary situation. Suddenly, I began to grasp the magnitude of my role. I think that the presence of these men in that meeting was intended in part to impress me with this fact. The secretary instructed me not to be nervous. He said that I was not in any trouble. He asked me if I thought the alien would be willing to answer a list of questions they had prepared. He explained that they were very eager to discover many more details about Errol, the flying disc, the domain, and many other subjects that Errol had disclosed in the interview transcripts. Of course, they were mainly interested in questions related to the military security and the construction of the flying disc. I told them that I was very sure that Errol had not changed her mind about answering questions, as nothing had changed that would cause her to trust the intentions of the men in the gallery. I repeated that Errol had communicated everything that she was willing and at liberty to discuss already. In spite of this, they insisted that I would ask Errol again if she would answer questions. And if the answer was still no, I was to ask her if she would be willing to read the written copies of the transcripts of my interview translations. They wanted to know if Errol would verify that my understanding and the translation of our interviews was correct.
Okay.
Since Errol could read English very fluently, the secretary asked if they could be allowed to observe for themselves while Errol read the transcripts and verify that they were correct in writing. They wanted her to write on a copy of the transcript whether the translations were correct or not, and to make a note of anything that was not accurate on the transcripts. Of course, I had no choice but to obey orders, and I did exactly what the secretary requested. I was given a copy of the transcripts with the signature page, which I was to show Errol. After Errol completed her review, I was also directed to request that Errol sign the cover page, attesting that all of the translations in the transcripts were correct as amended by her. About an hour later, I entered the interview room and, as instructed, with copies of the transcripts and signature page to deliver to Errol as the members of the gallery, including the generals and Mr. Lindbergh also, I presume, and others watched through the glass of the gallery room. I went to my usual seat, sitting 4 or 5 feet across from Errol. I presented the envelope of transcripts to Errol and passed on the instructions I had received from the secretary telepathically. Errol looked at me and looked at the envelope without accepting it. Errol said, "If you have read them and they are accurate in your own estimation, there is no need for me to review them also. The translations are correct. You can tell your commander that you have faithfully conveyed a record of your communication, of our communication." I assured Errol that I had read them and they were exact recordings of everything I told the transcription typist. "Will you sign the cover page then?" I asked. "No, I will not," said Errol. "May I ask why not?" I said. I was a little confused as to why she wasn't willing to do such a simple thing. If your commander does not trust his own staff to make an honest and accurate report to him, what confidence will my signature on the page give him? Why will he trust an ink mark on the page made by an officer of the domain if he does not trust his own loyal staff? I didn't quite know what to say to that. I couldn't argue with Errol's logic, and I couldn't force her to sign the document either. I sat in my chair for a minute wondering what to do next. I thanked Errol and told her I needed to go ask my superiors for further instructions. I placed the envelope of the transcripts in the inside breast pocket of my uniform jacket and began to rise from my chair. At that moment, the door from the gallery slammed open. 5 heavily armed military police rushed into the room. A man in a white laboratory coat followed closely behind them. He pushed a small cart that carried a box-shaped machine with a lot of dials on the face of it. Before I could react, 2 of the MPs grabbed Errol and held her firmly down in the overstuffed chair she had been sitting on since the first day of our interviews together. The other 2 MPs grabbed my shoulders and pushed me back down on my chair and held me there. The other MP stood directly in front of Errol, pointing a rifle directly at her, not more than 6 inches from her head. The man in the lab coat quickly wheeled the cart behind Errol's chair. He deftly placed a circular headband over Errol's head and turned back to the machine on the cart. Suddenly, he shouted the word, "Clear!" The soldiers who were holding Errol released her. At that instant, I saw Errol's body stiffen and shudder. This lasted about 15 or 20 seconds. The machine operator turned a knob on the machine and Errol's body slumped back into the chair. After a few seconds, he turned the knob again and Errol's body stiffened as before. He repeated the same process several more times. I sat in my chair being held down all the while by the MPs. And I didn't understand what was going on. I was terrified and transfixed by what was happening. I couldn't believe it. After a few minutes, several other men wearing white lab coats entered the room. They briefly examined Errol, who was now slumped listlessly in the chair. They mumbled a few words to each other. One of the men waved to the gallery window. A gurney was immediately rolled into the room by 2 attendants. These men lifted Errol's limp body onto the gurney, strapped her down across her chest and arms, and rolled it out of the room. I was immediately escorted out of the interview room by the MPs and taken directly to my quarters, where I was locked in my room with the MPs remaining at guard outside the door. After about half an hour, there was a knock at the door to my quarters. When I opened it, General Twining entered, together with the machine operator in the white lab coat. The general introduced the man to me as Dr. Wilcox.
Okay.
He asked me to accompany him and the doctor. We left the room, followed by the MPs. After several twists and turns through the complex, we entered a small room where Errol had been wheeled on the gurney. The general told me that Errol and the domain were considered to be a very great military threat to the United States. Errol had been immobilized so that she could not depart and return to her base, as she said she would do in the interview. It would be a very grave risk to national security to allow Errol to report what she observed during her time at the base. So it had been determined that decisive action was needed to prevent this.
I was wondering if that was the case, if they were trying to subdue her to prevent her from
leaving.
Yeah.
The general asked me if I understood why this was necessary. I said that I did, although I most certainly did not agree that it was the least bit necessary, and I certainly did not agree with the surprise attack on Errol and me in the interview room. However, I said nothing about this to the general because I was very afraid of what might happen to me and Errol if I protested. Dr. Wilcox asked me to approach the gurney and stand next to Errol. Errol lay perfectly still and unmoving on the bed. I could not tell whether she was alive or dead. Several other men in white lab coats, who I assumed were also doctors, stood on the opposite side of the bed. They had connected 2 pieces of monitoring equipment to Errol's head, arms, and chest. One of those devices I recognized from my training as a surgical nurse as an EEG machine, which was used to detect an electrical activity in the brain. The other device was abnormal hospital room vital signs monitor, which I knew would be useless since Errol did not have biological body. Dr. Wilcox explained to me that he administered a series of mild electroshocks to Errol in an attempt to subdue her long enough to allow the military authorities time to evaluate the situation and determine what to do with Errol. He asked me to attempt to communicate with Errol telepathically. I tried for several minutes but couldn't sense any communication from Errol. I couldn't even sense whether Errol was present in that body any longer. I think you must have killed her, I said to the doctor. Dr. Wilcox told me that they would keep Errol under observation and that I would be asked to return later to try and establish communication with Errol again. Humans.
Sounds like humans.
Yeah, right?
Humans doing the dumb things.
That's chapter 14. Chapter 15, My Interrogation.
Okay.
Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. The next morning, I was escorted from my quarters under the guard of 4 MPs to the interview room. Errol's overstuffed chair had been removed from the room and replaced by a small desk and several office chairs. I was asked to sit down and wait to be interviewed. After a few minutes, Dr. Wilcox came into the office together with another man wearing a plain business suit. The man introduced himself as John Reed. Dr. Wilcox explained to me that Mr. Reed had been flown in from Chicago at the request of my superior officers to conduct a lie detector test on me. My surprise at this statement was so obvious that Dr. Wilcox noticed that I was obviously taken aback and insulted at the insinuation that I had ever lied about anything. Nonetheless, Mr. Reed began to set up his polygraph device on the desk next to my chair, while Dr. Wilcox continued to explain in a calm voice that the test was being administered for my own protection, since all of the interviews with the alien had been conducted telepathically, that Errol had declined to read and attest to the typed transcripts that they were accurate. The truth and the accuracy of the statements contained in the transcripts depended entirely on my personal word alone. There was no other reliable way to test the accuracy of the transcripts without submitting me to a battery of tests and psychological examinations to determine, in the opinion of the experts, meaning himself, whether the transcripts could be taken seriously or not. The tone of his voice said very clearly, or dismissed as the delusional ranting of a mere woman. Mr. Reed proceeded to strap a rubber tube around my chest, as well as an ordinary blood pressure cuff around my upper arm. He then placed electrodes on the fingers and surfaces of my hands. He explained that he would be very objective during the interview because he had been thoroughly trained in scientific interrogation. This training was supposed to make the interrogation free from human error. Mr. Reed explained to me that in response to the questions he and Mr. Wilcox were going to ask me, that actual physiological changes would be transmitted through a small panel unit. The readings would then be tracked on moving graph paper, which he placed beside the machine on the desk. The parallel graphs on the paper would then be correlated and interpreted by Mr. Reed with the expert assistance of Dr. Wilcox to determine whether or not I was lying. Both Mr. Reed and Dr. Wilcox asked me a series of innocuous questions to begin, which advanced into more pointed interrogation about my interviews with Errol. And then we go into a sort of dialogue here.
Okay.
Here is what I remember about the questions. What is your name? Matilda O'Donnell, I replied. What is your date of birth? June 12th, 1924, I said. What is your age? 23. Where were you born? Los Angeles, California. And so on and so forth. Are you able to communicate by telepathy? No, I have never been able to do this with anyone except Errol, I said. Were any of the statements you made to the stenographer falsified? No, I answered. Have you intentionally or unintentionally imagined or fabricated any of the communication you claim to have had with the alien? No, of course not, I said. Are you intentionally attempting to deceive anyone? No. Are you attempting to obstruct this test? No. What color are your eyes? Blue. Are you a Catholic? Yes. Would you tell me the same stories to your would you tell the same stories to your parish priest in a Catholic church confessional that you told the stenographer here at the base? Yes. Are you trying to hide anything from us? No, nothing. Do you believe everything the alien communicated to you? Yes. See, I wouldn't necessarily believe everything that was communicated.
Yeah, you gotta have some sort of like degree of skepticism, but
Right.
yeah.
Do you consider yourself to be a gullible person? No. The questions continued in this manner for more than an hour. Finally, I was unhooked from the polygraph machine and allowed to return to my quarters, still under guard by the MPs. Later in the afternoon, I returned to the interview room. This time, the desk was replaced by a hospital gurney. Dr. Wilcox was accompanied by a staff nurse this time. He asked me to lie down on the gurney. He said that he had requested to ask me the same series of questions that I answered for the lie detector test. This time, however, I would respond to the questions under the influence of a truth serum, as known as sodium pentothal. As a trained surgical nurse, I was familiar with this barbiturate drug, as it was sometimes used as an anesthetic. Dr. Wilcox asked me if I had any objection to submitting to such a test. I told him that I had nothing to hide. I cannot recall anything about the interview. I assumed that when I finished answering the questions, I was escorted back to my room by the MPs, with their assistance this time, as I was too wobbly and woozy from the drug to navigate by myself. However, I had a very peaceful sleep that night. Apparently, neither of these investigations yielded any suspicious results, as I was not asked any more questions after that. Thankfully, I was left alone during the rest of my time at the base. Chapter 16, Errol Departs.
Ooh. How long is this one? Should we just finish off with this?
Is really short, and then we go into the postscript, and that's the end of the book. So
maybe we take a short break and we finish both of that? Both of those?
Yeah, sure, we could do that.
All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be back shortly to finish off Alien Interview. All right, be right back.
much time to waste. And I have stolen too many times for me to change my ways. I have wasted too much time. I feel the difference, but never on the inside. I see your colors coming, well, your ears are trying to hunt me down. I've rinsed the rest off my body. Your colors don't stain me now. Well, I'm a spectator of things passing by. Like they say, I live my life all in good time. I've been a giver. Oh, what a waste. Like an old lover, I've been living my days all in bad taste. Well, I see your colors coming, well, your ears are trying to hunt me down. I've rinsed the rest off my body. Your colors don't stain. Your colors don't stain me now.
Welcome back to the
all right.
final segment of Alien Interview. I think this is going to be
it's gonna be it for us probably on
the
this,
last
on this
of
book.
this topic. Yeah. So let's hop to it, and hopefully we get through it and have a chance to just kind of discuss the book as overall.
Yeah, let's go.
Chapter 16, Errol Departs. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy, personal note. I remained at the base, mostly confined to my quarters, for another 3 weeks after Errol had been incapacitated by Dr. Wilcox. One day, I was escorted to a room where Errol lay on the bed under continued surveillance by Dr. Wilcox and others, I assume. Each time I went to the room, I was asked to try and communicate with Errol again. Each time there was no response. This saddened me a great deal. As the days continued, I became increasingly more certain and distressed that Errol was dead, in quotes, if that is the right word for it. Every day I reread the transcripts of my interviews with Errol, searching for a clue that might remind me of something or help me in some way reestablish communication with Errol. I still had the envelope in my possession with copies of the transcripts that Errol was asked to sign. To this day, I don't understand why no one ever asked me to return them. I suppose they forgot about the copy of the transcripts in all the excitement. I did not offer to return them. I kept them concealed under the mattress of my bed all the time I remained at the base, and have kept them with me ever since then. You will be the first person to see these transcripts. Since Errol's body was not biological, the doctors could not detect whether the body was alive or dead unless it moved. Of course, I knew that if Errol was not consciously animating the body as an Isby, the body would not move. I explained this to Dr. Wilcox. I explained this to him several times. Each time, he just gave me a patronizing sort of smile, patted my arm, and thanked me for trying again.
Yeah, just ignoring her.
Yeah, right. At the end of the third week, I was told by Dr. Wilcox that my services would no longer be needed because it had been decided that the military to move Errol to a larger, more secure military medical facility that was better equipped to deal with the situation. He didn't say anything about where the facility was located. That was the time I saw Errol's doll body, or that was the last time.
The last time. Yeah, okay.
The following day, I received written orders signed by General Twining. The order said that I had completed my service to the U.S. military and was officially discharged from all further duty, and that I would receive an honorable discharge and a generous military pension. I would also be relocated by the military and given a new identity with appropriate documents. Along with the orders I received, a document that I was instructed to read and sign. It was an oath of secrecy. The language of the document was full of legalese, but the point was very clearly made that I was to never, ever discuss anything whatsoever with anyone about anything whatsoever that I had seen or heard or experienced during my service in the military, under pain of death as an act of treason against the United States of America. As it turned out, I was placed into federal government witness protection program, except that I would be protected from the government by the government. In other words, as long as I stayed quiet, I could stay alive. The following morning, I was placed aboard a small military transport plane and flown to a relocation destination. After being shuttled to several locations for short periods, I eventually ended up in Glasgow, Montana, near Fort Peck. The night before I was scheduled to board the transport plane, I lay in bed contemplating the whole affair and wondering what happened to Errol and to me. I suddenly heard Errol's voice.
Oh.
I sat bolt upright in my bed and turned on the light in the nightstand. I looked around the room frantically for a few seconds, then realized that it was Errol, the Isby. Her body was not in the room with me, of course, and it didn't need to be. She said, "Hello." The tone of her thought was plain and friendly. It was unmistakably Errol. I did not have the least doubt about that. I thought, "Errol, are you still here?" She answered that she was here, but not in a body on Earth. She had returned to her post at the domain base when the doctor and the MPs attacked us in the interview room. She was pleased to perceive that I was well and that I was going to be released unharmed. I wondered how she escaped from them. I was worried they might have injured Errol by the shock machine. Errol said that she was able to leave the body before the shock was administered and avoided the electric current running through the body. She wanted to let me know that she was safe and not to worry about her. I was very relieved, to say the least. I asked Errol if I would ever see her again. Errol reassured me that we are both Isbys. We are not physical bodies. Now that she had located me in space and time, we would always stay in communication. Errol wished me well, and my communication with her ended for the moment.
Yeah, the space and time thing always being something that they bring up kind of nonchalantly, but it's a real factor, right?
Yeah, like if you're an Isby, you still kind of need to know where in space and time to send your communications to.
Because if time is not a factor and you're able to move across these things as if time is not linear, then knowing the precise geospatial location of the target and time location of the target is, at paramount. You need that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. This is the last bit. Postscript from Mrs. McElroy. Editor's note. The following message was enclosed in a separate envelope marked "Read me last." Together with the original letter, the transcripts from the other notes of explanation I received in the envelope from Mrs. McElroy, this is what the message said. The other documents in this envelope are the end of the story as far as what happened back in 1947. However, several months later, after the government got me settled in my final relocation destination, I continued my communication with Errol on a regular basis.
Ooh, cool.
It has been almost exactly 40 years since the crash at Roswell. Since then, it has become obvious to me that I have been able to communicate telepathically with Errol for one reason. I am one of the 3,000 members of the Lost Battalion.
No way.
At this time, all of the members of the Lost Battalion have been located on Earth as a result of the Domain Anunnaki mission and their use of the Tree of Life detection device.
Wow.
Through my communication with Errol, I have recovered some of my memory of lives I've spent on Earth over the past 8,000 years. Most of these memories are not especially important compared to the long backtrack of events. But it has
How
been...
long? Sorry, 3,000 years?
8,000 years.
8,000 years she's been here.
Yeah.
This is McElroy
Yeah, recovering 8,000 years of memories of incarnations on
on
Earth.
Earth. Yeah, wow. Okay.
Most of these memories are not especially important compared to the long backtrack of events, but it has been a necessary stepping stone to regaining my awareness and ability as an ISBE. I can also remember some dim patches of my life in the Domain Expeditionary Force. I was a nurse there too. For the most part, I've been a nurse over and over and over again down through the ages. I stick with being a nurse because it is familiar to me, and I enjoy the work of helping people, as well as members of the race of biological beings in the domain whose bodies look more like insects than mammals.
Freaking.
It sounds like those weird S-type, like the little ones.
Yeah, I
Or
was
the
also thinking
mantises.
I was gonna say like a mantis, praying mantis or something.
Yeah.
Insectoid.
Especially their hands. Even doll bodies need some repair once in a while too. As I remember more about my past, I realize that the rest of my life is in the future. Eternity is not just in the past. Eternity is in the future. At this point, I am still not able to fully return to the domain. I am sentenced to an eternal imprisonment, like all the other ISBEs in the living hell called Earth, until we can disable the old Empire Force screens. Because I won't keep my biological body much longer now, I am intensely aware that very soon I will be recycled through the amnesia process of the old Empire and stuck back into another baby body to start all over again without any memory of what came before.
Man.
As you know, members of the Domain Expeditionary Force have been working to solve this problem for thousands of years. Errol says that even though the Domain has located all of the Lost Battalion officers and crew, the success of freeing them depends on the ISBEs who are already on Earth. The Domain Central Command cannot authorize any personnel or resources at this time to conduct a rescue mission as this is not in the primary mission of the Domain Expeditionary Force in this galaxy.
So unless they can, like, the Expeditionary Force can take now that they know the majority of the 3,000 people, even though they can continue to be recycled, I'm imagining that they may be able to have some sort of like, and maybe this is completely false based on whatever, but that maybe they can continue to communicate with these 3,000 over their lifetimes. and eventually get to a point where those 3,000 troops or whatever can like mount some sort of like, especially with the old empire not having as much of an influence anymore, can be the ones to like break everybody free of the system.
Right.
Eventually, over many lifetimes of them trying to get the world to a place where they can overcome it. Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
So, if Isbys on Earth are going to escape from this prison, it will have to be an inside job, so to speak. The inmates will have to figure out how to get themselves out. Various methods of recovering the memory and ability of Isbys has been developed over the past 10,000 years on Earth, but none have been proven to be consistently effective so far. Errol mentioned that the most significant breakthrough was made by Gautama Siddhartha about 2,500 years ago. However, the original teachings and techniques taught by the Buddha have been altered or lost over the millennia since then. The practical techniques of his philosophy were perverted into a robotic religious rituals by priests and self-serving instrument, or as a self-serving instrument of control or slavery. However, another major advance occurred recently. An acquaintance of the commanding officer of the Domain Expeditionary Force space station is an Isby who had once been an important engineer and officer in the old Empire space fleet. He became an untouchable himself about 10,000 years ago and was sentenced to Earth for leading a mutiny against the oppressive regime of the old Empire. The engineer was trained in advanced scientific improvisation theory thousands of years ago. This man has applied his expertise to helping the Domain solve the apparently unsolvable problem of rescuing the members of the Lost Battalion as well as the Isbys on Earth. Careful observation and experimental analysis of the mechanics of memory in Isbys by he and his wife, who assisted him, led to the realization that Isbys can recover from an amnesia and also regain lost abilities. Together, they discovered and developed effective methods that they used to rehabilitate their own memories. They eventually codified their methods so that others can safely be trained to apply them themselves and others without detection by the old Empire thought control operators. Their research also revealed that Isbys can occupy and operate more than one body at the same time, a fact that previously was thought to be uniquely limited to officers of the Domain. One example of this fact is that the engineer in a previous lifetime on Earth was Suleiman the Magnificent. His assistant was a harem girl who rose up from slavery to become his wife and rule the Ottoman Empire with him. Simultaneously, she inhabited another body and ruled her own empire as Queen Elizabeth, as the Queen of England. She never married because she was already married to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. So you can be incarnated into multiple bodies at the same time. I wonder what that sort of conscious experience would be like.
Yeah, maybe if you're on opposite sides of the world, you fall asleep and you go to the next one, right?
I don't think there's enough sleep hours to make that totally work, but that's interesting. Yeah, or maybe you go into a sort of autopilot.
Yeah, like there's a lot of parts of our days where we notice where even if you're, don't consider yourself being on autopilot, like you go to the same job, you do the same kind of tasks each day. There's enough time.
There's certain tasks that you can delegate to your subconscious.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that way, you might be able to run two bodies, but it seems hard to be able to actually split attention that way.
Yeah. Unless
it's done at a higher level.
Yeah, there's got to be a higher level, or the
really,
time is no factor. Like
Yeah.
you could pop between each one, make critical decisions for both at any minute, any given time.
right.
Especially when you think about like how she even mentioned how certain ISBs, based on their rank or they were granted more of their memory.
Well, better bodies.
And also more of their memories between each of the lives or whatever.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like an imprisoned ISB. Like you could still be imprisoned but have some of the
That's what you're
capabilities
talking about. Yeah.
or memories of your previous
Like if you're
lives.
one of the ruling
prisoners. Class or whatever. Yeah.
In a later life, he was incarnated as Cecil Rhodes. During his life as Rhodes, she was, again, a princess, this time from Poland. As such, she pursued Rhodes unsuccessfully toward the end of his life. However, in their next incarnation, they met again, were married, had a family, and again worked together successfully all of their lives. Dude, you imagine you incarnate, like you have split incarnation and then you marry your own other incarnation? That's weird.
It is crazy.
Several other notable examples of this phenomena were observed. For example, the process of refining steel was invented by the same ISB who inhabited two bodies simultaneously. One was named Kelly, who lived in Kentucky. The other was a man named Bessemer, who lived in England. They both conceived the same process at the same time. So is this saying like Newton and Leibniz, who both created calculus at the same time, or maybe like split incarnation?
Yeah, they're working at the same problem from two different directions and cracked at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also like we had talked about this before, is like the idea of like not being able to prove that somebody else's consciousness is outside of your own. Like anybody you interact with on any given day, like their abilities are potentially like just in like interpretations of your own consciousness. Like they're like I can't prove that you are not me.
You can't prove that I'm
onto
not
you.
like a robot pretending to be a human like you.
Right. Or that you're not another version of me in a different incarnation.
Sure.
That you're not like I can't necessarily wouldn't be able to decipher the fact that you are separate from me, because there's no proof that you are. There's no proof against it, but there's no proof that you are separate consciousness from me.
Yeah. You experience it as separate, but only in this realm.
Yeah. With this understanding and this, the memories that I have now.
Yeah.
Cool way to think about it.
It is. Another example is Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, which was invented by several others at the same time, including Elisha Gray. The telephone was conceived concurrently in several locations around the world all at once. This was a single ISB of such tremendous energy and ability that he was able to operate several bodies in several different locations while conducting complex research work.
Yeah, and maybe there's like you do that in a way to like guarantee that what you're working on is going to come to fruition.
Right. So you
because
split your attention
on multiple bodies doing the same kind of work, but then you know that like this body has more potential because of the resources they are able to draw
that they all can upload to a source in order to chew on the problem and push the answers back down.
Right. But you know that maybe one or two have more potential to actually make it come out and like come to fruition. And like, yeah.
Thanks to these revelations, the domain has been able to return some ISBs of the Lost Battalion to active duty on a limited part-time basis. For example, 2 young girls who occupy biological bodies on Earth are now, at the same time, working as active members of the Domain Expeditionary Force on the Asteroid Space Station as operators of a communication switchboard. These operators relay messages between the Domain Expeditionary Force and the Domain Command Headquarters. Recently, I myself have been able to resume some of my own duties for the Domain Expeditionary Force while continuing to live on Earth. This is not an easy task, however, and can only be done while my biological body is sleeping.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so you have 8 hours or however long you sleep. Like some people
Right.
sleep 12 hours. That's
Right.
half your day.
So
right
you
there,
come
right?
to some sort of awakening that you're part of this, and then when your human body is sleeping, your ISB spirit can be resuming its duties as a domain officer.
Yeah, so fascinating. And if being an ISB, right? So like the time that if you're only sleeping 6 to 8 hours a night, that 8 hours can feel like as an ISB a lot longer than the 8
Right,
hours, and you can
right.
do more with your time.
With time,
dilation, yeah.
Right. It makes me very, very happy to know that we may not have to stay on Earth forever. There is hope of escape, not just for the Lost Battalion, but for many other ISBs on Earth. However, all ISBs could be helped to become more aware of the actual situation on Earth through the information in this envelope. This is why I sent these letters and transcripts to you. I want you to get the documents published. I want ISBs on Earth to have a chance to find out what is really happening on Earth. Most people will not believe any of it, I'm sure. It seems too incredible. No reasonable person would ever believe a word of it. However, it only seems incredible to an ISB whose memory has been erased and replaced with false information inside the electronically controlled illusion of a prison planet. We must not allow the apparent incredibility of our situation prevent us from confronting the reality of it. Frankly, reasons have nothing to do with reality. There are no reasons. Things are what they are. If we don't face the facts of our situation, we're going to stay under the thumb of the old empire forever. The biggest weapon the old empire has left now is our ignorance of what they are doing to all the ISBs on Earth. Disbelief and secrecy are the most effective weapons they have. The government agencies that classified the enclosed transcripts as top secret are run by ISBs who are nothing more than mindless automatons covertly ordered about through hypnotic commands given them by the old empire prison operators. They are the unknowing slaves of unseen slave masters, and all the more enslaved by their willingness to be slaves. Most of the ISBs on Earth are good, honest, able beings, artists, managers, geniuses, free thinkers, revolutionaries who have harmed no one, really. They are no threat to anyone except the criminals who have imprisoned them. They must find out about the old empire amnesia and hypnosis operation. They must remember their own past lives. The only way this will ever happen is to communicate, coordinate, and fight back. We have to tell other people that they have to discuss it openly with each other. Communication is the only effective weapon against secrecy and oppression. This is why I'm asking you to tell this story. Please share these transcripts with as many people as you can. If the people of Earth are told what is really going on here, perhaps they will begin to remember who they are and where they came from. For now, we can begin our own release and rescue with words. We can be free again. We can be ourselves again. Perhaps I will meet you in person, with or without a body, somewhere in our eternal future. Good luck to all of us. Matilda O'Donnell McElroy. End of Mrs. McElroy's documents.
Wow.
And that's the end of the book.
Wow. I was going to say the end there reminded me of this quote from, I believe it was Jiddu Krishnamurti.
I'm pretty sure you butchered the fuck out of that.
For sure. Krishnamurti.
Krishnamurti? Okay.
Jiddu Krishnamurti. And it was, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe that they are free.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that idea of like you fully believe that you are free without any restraint on or any idea of how that looks or how
or any
little
attention paid to those who benefit from the nature of
your freedom.
Right.
Yeah. Then you are the most hopelessly enslaved because you are willingly ignoring all of the signs that show the opposite. Yeah.
So what do you think about the book as a whole?
I liked it a lot. I mean, obviously a lot of it can be taken with a grain of salt and a lot of it is just great storytelling, I believe, you know. But like it reminds me of what, you know, Pete Holmes was saying is like the craziest things, the craziest stories can only be told in metaphor. So like a lot of this in my mind is that same idea of like, and we've talked about this before too, is like allowing these stories and these types of things to fill up our mind space and to chew on the ideas that these things bring about. If nothing else, then,
even if you don't like, and maybe even especially if you're committing to not believing them,
right?
Just so that those ideas can like take hold in your in your cortex,
structure,
right?
Yeah.
And so that when things that ring true can call it to the surface and you can make connections that you couldn't otherwise couldn't have made.
Because you blocked them off because you're being so like dogmatic. Yeah. Right. I think being open to any and all information, whether it be metaphorical or in your mind of whatever time period you're listening to it in, ring more true than others. Like it should all be taken in with or without the grain of salt that you will place on it in any given moment, right?
Yeah. And so if you take this entire book as a sort of like metaphorical truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then what I take as like the big things from it that I find the most credible, I take this idea of the doll bodies pretty seriously.
Yep, same.
I think it's a really apt description for what a very highly evolved conscious civilization would be able to do.
Would be wanting to do, if they're going to interact with
like why
life.
Commit to constantly incarnating biologically when it comes with so many downsides when you could,
especially if you're looking to make changes,
right? Create these temporary incarnations that are just doll bodies that you can have them strewn all over the place and you can inhabit one just for a task and then go out,
or create one just for a task,
right?
Yeah.
Just to be able to physically manipulate matter, right?
Exactly. Because if you really want to make change, you have to be outside of it. You have to be outside of the life in which you are trying to create real change, long-lasting change, in my view.
Yeah, but if you want to change the flow of a river, you need a physical body to be able to do some digging, and right?
Right. You still have to interact.
You want to build a structure on the face of the earth. You need a physical incarnation in order to lay bricks.
But if you're going to be the same physical incarnation as the rest, you're less likely to make the drastic changes because of the limitations of those beings, right?
Right.
So if you have a doll body,
right,
where it's a physical manifestation in the galaxy,
and
it lets
you direct physical matter.
Exactly. And you can maybe shapeshift or whatever, and you can like live multiple lives or live long enough to be considered a god or whatever, right? You know, like you have these abilities that people may, you know, see you as being some sort of a religious figure.
Yeah. So that's one thing I've definitely taken from this is this doll bodies concept. And the other thing is I really do like this like connotation, like this description of Isbies.
Yeah.
Like I like this way of describing everything and every like
Consciousness
every
and
consciousness
souls
as
and-
an immortal
yeah.
spiritual being.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. I find it intriguing that they say that the universe is trillions of years old, especially with the types of like physics videos and stuff I've been watching recently.
Yeah, which we'll probably go into in
we'll have to go
subsequent
into some of that
videos we post.
It's a lot of like plasma universe theories and stuff that
which we've talked about
essentially-
the electric universe, the plasma universe a little bit before.
which essentially says that like the Big Bang model is wrong.
Yeah, but it's a cool spin on the history of physics and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought Errol was an interesting character. I thought Matilda was an interesting character and pretty believable. I thought the circumstances and the like governmental treatments of the situation were relatively believable.
Because of the time frame and like, you know, it all being like right after Roswell too. Like it seems pretty
Well, this
standard.
was Roswell.
Well, I know. I'm
Right.
just saying, like it being like that time frame of right around that 1945
Mm-hmm.
era, and the way that they operated militarily and
Right.
secretively seems to line up pretty well.
So I found all that like credible.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously
Believable. I don't know if I believe it all, but it's believable.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not so far out. Like there's not enough evidence here, obviously, to just be like, okay, well, this is my new belief system, right?
Yeah, of course not. Yeah.
But there's enough to be like, okay, well, this is
It's plausible enough.
it's plausible, and if in the future things come up to corroborate details about this story, then I'm open to that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that speaks to the importance of being open-minded and
Yeah.
allowing yourself to like put yourself out there to like see different points of view on the world, because nobody knows. We
Yeah.
don't know.
Right.
Science doesn't know the all of the actual facts of existence and life and the history of everything. It's all a metaphor for the symbols that and the patterns that have emerged over time.
Yeah.
You know, and we just make a story out of it. It's none of it is true. None of it is fact. It's all a story fabricated over millennia by other human beings who are just the finders of the artifacts.
Right.
It's none of it can be taken for 100% truth.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to intake all of these different points of views, whether it be more or less fantastical, you know?
I find certain elements of this book to be more likely that this Lawrence Spencer maybe embellished certain sections.
Sure.
There's certain like repeat words that I find conspicuous for the time that this was published.
Sure. Yeah.
Which was what, in the 2000s, early 2000s.
It seems too like contemporary to the
Well-
time of it being published.
Well, just specifically like this terminology of like space opera
Dude, we live.
civilizations.
Yeah.
That
That
to
was
me,
a lot of early 2000s vibes are there.
Yeah, to me that speaks of like the resurgence of like Dune and like Star
Star
Wars
Wars,
in the
exactly.
2000s and stuff,
Space
and
Trek.
Matrix, and
Yeah.
it speaks to someone who's like immersed in sci-fi.
But also it seems
Makes
like
me
somebody
think
who's
of like The Fifth Element.
But
and
it speaks to again, he's still up on the screen here on this other monitor. Like Pete Holmes' idea of like the metaphor, right? Like you see,
right.
and the way you can translate your world is contemporaneous to your time period. So if what he was reading was something that can be metaphorized, or I'm just going to say metaphorized, into something like that, then it made sense. But now you would need something more modern to get people to understand what it is that you're getting from the transcript, right?
Yeah.
Make it more contemporaneous, like a space opera. Like that's why it resonated with us. Like we were laughing, we were having a good time with it. Like that made sense because it kind of.
No, I see what they're saying by it.
Yeah.
I just like the term was used by Errol multiple times, and this was in the 50s. So this was like the 50 or the 40s, right? Was before the whole like Star Wars and Dune stuff, right? But like the writing of Lawrence Spencer in the 2000s or in the 90s, that's post that stuff. That would be informed by this whole space opera genre of sci-fi.
Right.
Whereas I don't necessarily think it would be if Errol was referring to things she read in the 40s. I don't think she necessarily would have come up with those words. It seems like a weird choice of words that seems tied to like a human cultural age.
Yes. But I mean,
even if there are embellishments or edits or like things like that by the editor, that doesn't necessarily mean that the underlying material isn't true either.
right. Well, and I would say if you're going to give any kind of like credence to it, I would say like, I mean, we got to continue to remember that if you were going to take any part of it to be true, then
True as a metaphor.
Yeah. Then like they are outside of time in a sense. So like their references, whether she was, because Errol was being told all the history from a central intelligence kind of like mainframe where they're getting all their like history, but history is relative, right? So like if you're talking about a time, like if they're able to travel through time, then it doesn't matter. Like they're just pulling all sorts of information about Earth from all different time frames. It doesn't matter necessarily when.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's just, if you were going to give any kind of credence to that. But
yeah,
all in all, I think it was fascinating. I loved the stories of it all. And, whether it was true or not, I think it was a good read. And I'm glad we put it out there on our podcast. And I think it is something that should be continued to and even this author, like they're putting it out there, and we'll see if we get a strike on it, but we haven't gotten one yet.
Yeah, right. By the way, support Lawrence Spencer. I'll leave links just like I did for the first episode of this series
go
to
read
all
this.
of the things he's done. He's got a website and a bunch of other sci-fi books he's written.
Okay.
He actually has a sci-fi book written as like in the world that this sets up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like this whole sci-fi novel taking place within that sort of framework.
Nice. But he very clearly distinguishes it as sci-fi.
Yeah, this one is
from
claimed
this
as him by fiction based on this.
Gotcha. Okay. That's cool. I'm gonna have to read some of that.
So,
all right, y'all. Well, I appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We're sorry we missed a week, but we're gonna keep trekking through, and maybe we'll do a double weekend here soon, and we'll post some extra stuff. But if you guys are listening on any of the podcast platforms and you guys want to see some the video here, where we got our cameras up, we're showing anything that we're pulling up on our cameras here, or on the websites or whatever. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Yeah, sorry, we're on YouTube and Rumble if you guys want to watch us on any of the video stuff. You can also go to our website, dualitycheck.net. It's got everything on there, the video, the audio, all the clips, all the tags. Here it is right here.
Yeah, you can like
You
click
see our
on
artwork. You
DMT,
can,
for instance, and here's all the episodes where we talked about DMT.
Yeah, so anything we tagged with DMT, you can, if you're specifically interested in that. If you're specifically interested in UFOs or UAPs or mysteries or this or that or Göbekli Tepe, any of that, you guys can find it on our website, and it'll link to any of the episodes we we have talked about those things. So
Here's
it's a
the
good
episodes
resource.
we talked about reincarnation.
Yeah, it's been a good amount of episodes now. Probably
Yeah, it has.
10.
Oh, there's the one with Chris from earlier. This is number 49.
There it is. Integrating Your Dark Side. Number 49, Alan Watts and Carl Jung. That's
Yeah.
right. That was a good episode. We post we usually post Tuesday or Wednesday. You guys can find out by following us on Instagram and Facebook. I think that's pretty much it. Anything else?
I think that's about it. Email us. Please join the
Yes.
conversation. You can email us at hosts@dualitycheck.net if that's a simple way to get a hold of us. Let us know what you think of this content. Do you think Errol, the story of Errol, is
This
true?
whole series, yeah.
Yeah. So you can email us, or you can also message us through Facebook and Instagram and
Or YouTube comments or
YouTube
Rumble comments.
comments.
Any of that we check on the weekly.
comments on the website as well on a particular
Mhm.
episode. Every episode has a comment section, so you can comment directly on there too.
It's all super helpful to get us exposed to more people. Yeah, please join the conversation. Appreciate y'all. All right, we'll see you next week for
Yeah.
episode 85.
Yes, we'll see you guys next week.
Later.
Adios.